But I really don't have any regrets. I really don't. I've lived exactly how I've wanted to. I've tried my hardest every single time. I didn't win the matches that maybe I should have always won, but I really gave it my all. So that for me is enough.
Hello everybody, welcome back to The Body Serve. I'm Jonathan.
And I'm James.
We've had a hell of a week.
Yeah, it's been a really tough week. Maybe you haven't seen our social media, but sadly we had to say goodbye to Vince, our beagle, who we've had for 14 years. Almost 14 years. He was really close to turning 16. It's still really difficult to talk about.
Maybe I'll give a little bit of a backstory about Vince.
Okay.
Here. Probably unwisely, very early on in our relationship, we were like, let's get a dog.
This is after I moved from New York to Ontario, Canada, and we moved in together for the first time. We went to grad school together. It was very... there were a lot of changes. All at once.
And it wasn't... who knew that we'd still be together, right?
Right.
So I floated the idea of getting a dog, and you're like, no, that's Mr. Practicality here. He was like, I don't think that's wise. And then all of a sudden, like out of the blue, like a couple months later, you're like, yep, I want a dog. We went to the London Humane Society and filled out the paperwork and all that stuff. And they were like, well, let's look at the dogs. And we took another beagle, whose name was Beacon, out into the play area. And we're like, you know what? This works for us. And so we go to officially say, like, yeah, we want to adopt Beacon. And then the woman who was working said, but have you seen Vince? And we're like, no. And the reason why we didn't see Vince is because they had so many dogs that he was housed on the bottom floor with the rabbits in a separate area.
Yeah, like in one of those wall cages.
And so we took Vince out into the yard, and it was like magic. It was instant. It was like, yep. Vince's face card never once declined. In fact, he was never asked to present it. Not once. Truly a stunningly beautiful dog. Very temperamental. He was very particular. And we are, looking back on it, having a week's distance out from it, we were so lucky to have him for so long.
Yeah, I'm more than anything, I'm just grateful. It's, it's hard to get past that initial shock, but...
Thank you to everybody who reached out to us over the last week. It became clear that Vince was very much a part of the Body Serve. So many of you felt like you knew him, which in itself was very touching. And with that, we'll get the show started because... We've already said more than we thought we would have been able to.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's move on to greener pastures.
Well, I think to change the dynamic for us and have it be a bit light, let's do something messy first. Let's upend the agenda and go to Mr. Reliable.
Who?
Novak Djokovic.
Oh, okay.
We solicited mailbag questions, in part because we knew what we were going to be faced with the last few weeks, the coming weeks, and didn't know how we would be able to curate episodes, create content. And so we needed like a fallback, right? Mm-hmm. But with that, so many of you asked questions surrounding this press conference that Djokovic was set to give. I believe it was the day after we last recorded. And it turned out...
Right. We even considered waiting to record to see what this press conference was all about. And I'm so glad we didn't. It was clearly much overhyped by the sports media. There was nothing there. There was no there.
Nothing to it.
It was, I'm still trying to get into the United States. I've applied for an exemption or whatever they call it, which we assumed. And
update on his health, all that stuff.
Talk about how the hamstring tear was a real thing. I don't know why you don't believe me. And it was also just a day for fans to hang out, and I think he signed some stuff, and like there were kids there, right? It's just a normal thing that he does. It wasn't some big important press conference.
Right. He was playing in Dubai, and with that, him being on the tennis circuit again, with Indian Wells and Miami coming up, with the knowledge that he had applied for this exemption and us not knowing how that would turn out, that kind of dominated the Novak news this past week. We get confirmation that this special exemption has been denied. Djokovic will not play in the Sunshine Double. But as has been the case with everything Novak related during the pandemic, the discourse gets co-opted.
Yes. Now, before we heard that the application had been denied, Indian Wells and Miami and the US Open, for some reason, had already done a tweet campaign stating that Novak should be allowed to play. He's earned it. Just give him the exemption. I understand why Indian Wells and Miami would do that, because the draws are pretty light this year on the men's side. Now, the USTA does not own any part of either of those tournaments, so I was sort of confused. I'm sure somebody else could explain what their financial incentive is for getting involved, but they don't make any money directly from the tournaments, I don't think. Miami is owned by IMG. Indian Wells is owned by Larry Ellison. Both the grounds and the tournament itself are wholly owned by him.
Senators Rick Scott and Marco Rubio start tweeting about this stuff.
Senator Rick Scott from Florida tweeted, @Joker Nole has earned the right to compete in the Miami Open. Senator Marco Rubio and I just have one question. Will Joe Biden let him? And he even wrote a letter, right? Let's be very clear. These guys don't even know who he is. Like, they wouldn't know Novak if they passed him on the street. Maybe they've watched one or two tennis matches. This is purely political theater. They do not give a fuck if he plays in the Miami Open. These are the senators from Florida. This is what they feel they have to do. This is their brand. They need to just appeal to their rotten supporters, essentially.
And then we have surrogates Isner and Ellen Perez taking to the airwaves, the Twitter airwaves, as shoddy as they are at the moment, to...
Well, these are clearly Novak surrogates. She's very active on Twitter, and she's tweeting about, well, you know, I haven't had a booster in so long. Basically, it means I've never had one, but I get to go play the tournament. How come he doesn't? It just betrays a really embarrassing lack of knowledge about science. And I'm not claiming to be a scientist, but I would never tweet something like that and expose my ignorance.
Mm. And then we had one Billie Jean King quote tweet the US Open account to say, "Hope to see Novak play at Indian Wells and Miami."
Like, Billie, why are you doing this? I just don't understand. Billie Jean, I feel like she is compelled to comment on basically all of the current events in sport, in tennis especially, and most of the time she's on a really progressive side. Like, she's trying to cement her legacy, and she's taken a very clear, distinct approach on trans rights versus Chrissy and Martina. I don't really know why she dipped her toe in here.
Typically, Billie's brand is, if there's anybody of note in the sporting world who has passed, she is there to commemorate it.
Yeah.
If the bird that flew over Arthur Ashe when Serena and Venus first played a US Open final passes away, Billie Jean King will write.
And she knows about it.
Exactly. I don't understand why we're still talking about this.
At this point, in 2023, they're all pissed off because the rules are set to expire in a few months. And they're saying, well, what's the point? Why not just let him in? Okay, so what's the argument? The argument is you feel the rules aren't based on scientific fact.
That the rules haven't been implemented fairly or evenly over the years, which they haven't. We traveled to the States by ground quite a few times and were never asked for a vaccine certificate.
Well, the rules have been different from ground versus air travel throughout the whole pandemic on a number of different points.
Right, but at times when we would have been required to present one, we didn't have to.
That's true. And so people say, his fans say that he's being penalized by his fame. Like, okay. But he said, I have made a choice. I am happy to live with the consequences of that choice. And at every turn, he's shown that he's not happy to live with the consequences of that choice. And he has 1,000 surrogates out here, senators now, doing his bidding, begging Joe Biden. And it's all Joe Biden's fault, of course. Why? But why would you lift it for him? Out of anyone. There are two legal reasons to accept the application. One is that someone has medical contraindications and can't take the vaccine. That's not it. The second is in the national interest. And again, I say, like at the US Open, why is it in the national interest that Novak Djokovic plays Indian Wells or Miami? Did the US Open suffer because he wasn't there? I would argue not.
And yes, in this instance, he is a victim of his fame, to a degree, right?
Because he can't slip in like some other people can.
If he weren't famous and nobody really was tracking his movements, maybe he could have crossed a border somewhere and rented an Alamo van and made his way across country.
Mm-hmm. And you notice how easily the anti-vax movement slips into anti-immigrant sentiment. Mm-hmm. How many tweets you've seen about how, well, if he was a Mexican crossing the border illegally, he could just get in. Like, how quickly we go there.
But he also benefits from his fame. Well, because by taking this stance and being so public about it, he has elevated himself in certain circles.
He has. I would argue he's more famous because of it.
Mm-hmm. He set himself up for whatever political turn he wants to do after his playing career is done. Like, my main issue with this is wanting to have your cake and eat it too.
Right.
Wanting to do whatever you want, whenever you want. Maintain some kind of moral high ground of my body, my choice, co-opting verbiage from other things, and just not doing what you said you would. Like, you took an allegedly principled stance. Stand by it. I'm tired of hearing about it.
Right.
Does that mean that he's still not the best player in the world? He absolutely is. Does not mean that he's entitled to do whatever he wants, just because he can play tennis better than anybody else on the men's tour right now.
I don't know where the rules people are right now.
Well, we always knew.
Rules are rules as long as you like the rule, basically.
As long as certain people aren't benefiting from the rules. Only certain people can break rules.
The other thing about Novak, we were talking last 2 weeks ago, when he, I'm not even going to say, he got more weeks at number one.
Mm-hmm.
However, everybody and their mother and the WTA took it as he beat Steffi Graf's record at number one of 377 weeks.
Now, why would the WTA be participating in this?
This
boggles the mind.
This was honestly disturbing to me. It really made me upset. The WTA tweeted and then wrote a story about how Novak broke Steffi's record. Steffi, a WTA player, who owns the WTA record. She's a woman tennis player. How many times are we told these are different games, different sports? We don't compare records. So why is the WTA doing it? Is this a consequence of Tennis United? That you make your own record seem small because a man passed an imaginary milestone?
Mm.
And again, this really has nothing to do with Novak's 378 weeks at number one. I'm not diminishing that. My point is, why are you comparing the two?
Okay. Are we ready to talk about some actual tennis now?
Sure.
Because Barbora Krejcikova did the thing.
This seems like so long ago, but Barbora beat the number one player in the world, Iga Swiatek, to win Dubai. She also beat the number 2 and number 3 players. She saved match points. She basically parked her feet on the service box to return Iga's second serve and just demolished it. It was a very exciting week to be a Barbora fan.
She even overcame eating bagels that week, but was unperturbed In the quarterfinals, she gets bageled by Sabalenka in the first set, winning the second in a tiebreak and then running away with it in the third, 6-1. And then she hands Pegula a third set bagel on Jesse's birthday. And Pegula tweeted about it afterward, saying, this is what the life of a tennis player is, getting bageled on your birthday.
Right. And then she's like eating Doritos and waiting for a flight from Dubai back home to the US. Mm-hmm. Earlier, she beat Daria Kasatkina. She was down 4 match points and saved them. Beat Petra, all to reach the final and to face Iga, who's on a serious roll again, right? We were talking last week about, is this the start of this another imperious run for Iga? Because the Sunshine Double's coming.
She had just won in Doha.
Mm-hmm. And Clay was right around the corner. And Barbora is just a bad matchup for Iga. And part of the reason is that she's just so good at taking the ball early. She knows how to read Iga's serve. And it feels like she can see the court better than almost anybody. Like she's thinking a few steps ahead out there.
Well, we know that she's a student of the game. She attends every match that she possibly can. She's always watching tennis. Renee Denfeld tweeted that her game is metronomic.
Yes, like a metronome. Mm-hmm. Very like she's keeping the beat. It feels almost automatic when she plays. And I was watching her and I'm like, wow, there's something so aesthetically pleasing about watching this woman play, and I can't really put my finger on it. But I think that's it.
That spoke to the musician in you.
Yes. It just feels so steady. But you know how much work it goes into making things look that natural.
Right. And something has clearly clicked because not more than a few weeks ago, she was looking rusty coming back from injury. And now she had this humongous win. Series of wins.
And another one, right?
Clearly showing that she can match up against anybody in the world.
Yes, because she played a bunch of different kinds of players this week and handled them all. During the final, it was so funny to me how she was able to return Iga's serve, because everybody on tennis Twitter is always talking about Iga's serve is beatable, right? It's, if you read it, you should be attacking it. Why aren't the girls doing it? And
well, that's
Babs
it.
did it.
You have to read it.
Right. She stood so close to return the second serves. It looked like Serena Williams returning serves out there. She stepped in so far, and my gosh, she just punished these returns. Iga only won 4 of 17 second serve points. That's really bad.
Iga has made 15 career WTA finals, winning 12 of them. 2 of those 3 losses have now come to Barbora Krejcikova.
Right. By the way, there were 10 finals in a row that she won. She was the finals queen. But there's something about facing Krejcikova that is really difficult for her. Now, Iga was sick. She wasn't at kind of her optimal powers. And reportedly, she's still sniffling down in Indian Wells this week, which is kind of alarming. Like, I hope everything is fine. Another WTA 1000 and another just incredible quarterfinal lineup. And I feel like on the current WTA, you could have 32 different players in the quarterfinals and call it an unbelievable lineup. This one had Muchova. She has been coming back from injury gradually, hitting tweeners, working magic on the court. She got a big win over Belinda Bencic, only to have to withdraw in the quarterfinals with an abdominal injury that we hope is not serious, because people, we love her. Everybody wants to see her come back. Madison is in the quarterfinals. She needed a rebound. She lost a lot of points from the Australian Open, having not defended semifinal points.
Was in the quarterfinals.
Right. Sorry, this was a while ago now.
Yes.
She beat Garcia and Azarenka to get there. And unfortunately, in those 4 quarterfinal matches, 2 of them were walkovers. But what a lineup.
In Merida, I won't make that mistake again. The Giorgi syndicate rolled right through, right into Mexico, and walked away with the title.
Wow. First of all, she beat Queen of Mexico, Sloane Stephens, 6-love, 6-love. Mm-hmm. The rare double bagel. Against a player of Sloane's caliber, it was shocking.
Well,
I mean, sure, Sloane may go through long stretches of just not very good play, but she seems to light up in Mexico. But a double bagel? Come on, people were gagging.
It was eye-opening. It's the 4th title of her career, and first since winning the Canada Masters in Montreal in 2021. Wow, and you have here, I didn't see you add this to the agenda.
Wait.
You have in parentheses, and her first while under investigation for medical fraud.
Well, is it not? That's an achievement in and of itself, being able to overcome that sort of scrutiny and pressure.
Well.
Finishing up WTA this past week, another Mexican tournament, this one in Monterrey. Donna Vekic beat Caroline Garcia in the final.
Like Giorgi, this is the 4th WTA title of Vekic's career, and she's really on an upswing. We learned in Australia that she was working with Pam Shriver. Mm-hmm. She made the quarterfinals there, subsequent quarters, and now a title in Monterrey. This after, if you recall, she made the final in San Diego last fall, losing to Iga Swiatek. So this is a sustained run for Vekic.
Yeah, because not so long ago, Vekic was seeing the lowest of lows. Really just a bad turn in her career. In Austin, Texas, a new tournament in Austin, Marta Kostyuk beat Gracheva, a Ukrainian versus Russian final. The players did not shake at the end of the match, and some people were making a big thing of this, but it seemed to have been an understanding between the two of them that it wasn't going to happen. It wasn't like, somebody stormed off. It was just an acknowledgement that a Ukrainian and Russian player are not going to shake right now.
Or at least...
Or these two aren't.
These two.
Yeah.
And talk about sport not being political. Mm-hmm. Bookmark this one.
Right.
Bookmark this one the next time somebody says that there are no politics in sport.
Right.
Or that there shouldn't be politics in sport. Because at the core of it, players are human. And in this instance, these two players, you may say especially Kostyuk, are particularly affected by the world around them. And their actions on the court are a byproduct of that. And it's not for us. We have now firmly taken the stance that it's not for us to opine one way or the other the validity of those actions.
So some people are taking the opportunity because they don't like her to pounce on it. And frankly, I don't care. I really don't care if you don't like her. Over on the ATP side, Carlos Alcaraz and Cameron Norrie were trading South American tournaments back and forth. Mm-hmm. Alcaraz won, what was it? It was BA, Buenos Aires, beating Norrie in the final. The following week, they get to the final again in Rio, and Norrie gets revenge. Carlos seems to have a what's the word? Reappearance, reemergence,
a re-aggravation,
of the hamstring injury, and I don't know it. It could have been a distinct injury. I'm not sure, but it turns out he does have a grade 1 hamstring strain. He did continue through that final, clearly hampered. It looked like his team was trying to encourage him to stop. He refused to. Sound familiar? Rafael Nadal, and luckily it didn't. It didn't get much worse, right? It's still only a grade 1. It's not a very serious strain. It's the kind of thing that you fix using the Rice method. Rest, ice, compression, elevation.
I've never heard of that.
Are you serious?
Serious.
I'm not even an athlete.
Oh.
I looked it up because I wanted to know what grade 1 meant. But it does require some rest. And so when I heard that he was seriously contemplating playing in Dubai, I was alarmed. For a young player to be thinking about this, I have to hope that his team was seriously discouraging it. But that should have never been on the table, because there wasn't even a week break. Would have had to get on a plane and go straight there.
I saw a lot of talk on Twitter as well as to why Cameron Norrie was playing in South America. Why is he playing on clay at this stretch? Why isn't he in the Middle East? Why isn't he playing Rotterdam?
Right, but why not? Well, once you see the results, it's like, wow, what an opportunity that was.
Well, also, it sets him up really nicely for the clay swing to have results that he never had before, to take another step forward in his career, because his is one of improbability, his career so far, right? It took a long time, myself included, to really consider Cam Norrie a perpetual threat on the ATP Tour, like a serious, legit contender. And if he's able to add clay to his resume, I mean, watch out.
Yeah, he's a huge overachiever, right? But the athletes always tell you never underestimate the type of confidence you get from winning. So if he went down to South America thinking, I'm going to win some matches here, like if anything, I may not win titles, I may not win the biggest money there is, but if I can win matches here, I can carry that through. Momentum is so important in tennis.
And you get 2 looks at Alcaraz in back-to-back weeks.
Right. And you can say you beat this kid. Because even an Alcaraz on one leg is deadly, as you saw in that final. Some of the shots he was able to pull off out of desperation, it is so hard to put him away.
The other big news on the ATP Tour is that Daniil Medvedev went back to back to back.
Yeah.
He went from Rotterdam to Doha to Dubai and won them all.
You had this on the agenda. Medvedev goes B2B, and I had to add another 2B because he won a third tournament. 14 matches in a row, 15 sets in a row, actually. Went through the Dubai draw without losing a set, and that's including wins over Djokovic and Rublev.
Djokovic in the semis and Rublev in the final. Mm-hmm. After winning that final, on court, he took some shots at Stefanos Tsitsipas. He had been waiting to do this.
You know, you just have to respect a petty queen. Like, you really do. The way he reignited this feud they have.
They had that famous on-court scuffle years ago, right?
Yes. This was even before Daniel was really famous. You know, Stefanos was the bigger player at the time. And they got in that scuffle, and Daniel said, "Shut your fuck up, man."
Man, you better shut your fuck up. He was basically referencing Tsitsipas being all salty in press, saying that Rublev doesn't have any weapons. I don't really know why he's winning matches. He's not a threat. He does one thing. Mm-hmm. And so Daniil was like, somebody said that this guy only has one weapon and can't do all these things, but I don't know what they're talking about because, he can do all these things. He's going to win Grand Slams, da-da-da-da-da-da. Like, for that to be the go-to.
Right. So he had been sitting on this for a while. And he would like to bring it up now in the trophy presentation. Daniel says things with this knowing smirk that is just deeply charismatic. It really is.
He knew what he was doing.
His faults.
He knew what he was doing.
It was like, she just says things and speaks her mind. It's because Stefanos really does give Martina Hingis sometimes.
He definitely gives not having a formal education.
Oh my
no shade.
That is so rude.
No shade to those who don't have them.
And it's not like literal.
No.
Not like a literal education. It's no, but Stefanos likes to say things and speak his mind. He's just less confrontational than Martina, but there are definitely elements there.
Stefanos doesn't have the gravitas to back it up. He doesn't have the self-confidence, like the maniacal self-confidence that Martina Hingis had. Knowing that you can try, you can come for my crown, and if you manage to get past the guards and the moat and the castle bridge, if you cross it before it...
The drawbridge goes
up, before it comes up, I'll handle you on my own.
Right. You're going to have to knock her crown off. So back to Medvedev, he just had an incredible 3 weeks, which it felt like he kind of needed. His Australian Open was so disappointing, having lost in the third round to Korda. He lost a bag of points. It knocked him out of the top 10.
He's back to number 6, by the way. I think up to number 5 in the live rankings as of right now.
It just seemed like he really needed a run like this. He had something to prove. I might be putting words in his mouth, but he might have been feeling a bit injured that he was no longer in the top 10 where he had been since July 2019.
And if he felt a little bit salty that he was no longer in the talk, he did something about it.
Exactly. I mean, so this is, as we know, it's a strange part of the calendar. There are players playing all over the place, but look at the caliber of players he beat over these past 3 weeks. There were no soft draws in these 250s and 500s. He beat Felix, Yannick Sinner in the Rotterdam final, Dimitrov, Andy Murray, Borna Coric, Djokovic, Rublev.
He's the first player, you have this noted here, so if it's wrong, everybody can blame you. He's the first player since Andy Murray in 2011 to win in 3 consecutive tournaments.
No.
In 3 consecutive weeks.
Exactly.
Okay.
3 tournaments in 3 weeks, which I cannot even imagine the work, the strain it takes to do that.
Shout out to Andy Murray and his run in Doha, because he looked defeat in the eye multiple times and said, I shan't. Just absurd, grueling tennis that he was able to win. Previously, he'd have, one great long drawn-out battle, and then, well, the next match, the writing was on the wall, but he was able to string together a few wins in Doha to actually make the final. He actually saved match points in multiple matches. He saved 3 against Sonego and then 5 against Lehechka. The Lehechka one, if you haven't watched it, go back and at least watch the highlights. Just absurd stuff.
Think about the fact that Andy spent 10 hours on court just to reach the final. This is at a 250 event.
Best of 3.
Right, when you're playing every day. You're playing back-to-back. He's playing and beating players like Sonego, Zverev, Lehechka, who hits a huge ball. And you've done all of this work. I don't mean this to be a party pooper, but you have done all this incredible work for 150 points, right? To be a runner-up in a 250.
Yeah.
It's just like this draw is so high caliber. Not to be outdone, Andrei Rublev saved 5 match points in a row against Alejandro Davidovich Fokina. He was down 1-6 in their second set tiebreak and won 5 points in a row to save all those match points.
Rublev scored his very first career win against that guy.
He did. This was their 6th career match, and clearly there was a matchup problem going on there.
He had never even won a set.
But this is the time to get him, Kick him while he's down.
Oh my God.
I mean, the best of luck. Wishing him luck.
And then in Dubai, Medvedev beat Djokovic 6-4, 6-4 in the semis to snap Djokovic's 20-match season-opening win streak. Which, if that sounds familiar, it's just about what Nadal did last year.
And just to be clear, Rublev did all that match point heroics at Dubai, not Doha. Not the same tournament.
At Dubai.
In Dubai. To Dubai. Of Dubai. With Dubai. Like... Whatever. But you were saying Medvedev snaps Djokovic's 20-match win streak, which I believe equals Rafa's win streak to start last year. I think he played 21 matches. Well, didn't play. There was a walkover in there, so it stayed at 20. Rafa famously lost at the Indian Wells final. In the Indian Wells final. Djokovic, he just wasn't 100%. Medvedev played... Sorry, not to imply that he was injured. I'm saying he just wasn't playing his very best tennis, clearly. Medvedev's defense was out of this world. And he was just beating Djokovic in the rallies. We have a few other tournaments just to kind of catch up on over the past 2 weeks. Last week in Marseille, Urkac beat Bonzi. Acapulco was this week. There was a 500 in Acapulco and one in Dubai, of course. Alex de Minaur beats Tommy Paul in the final there. This was definitely a more Anglophone 500. A lot of Americans in the draw, an Australian one. Fritz beat Isner in 3 sets. I don't know why he's losing a set to John Isner without a tiebreak. Beat Shapovalov, Francis, but then lost to his friend Tommy in the semifinals. This week in Santiago, Chile, Nicolas Jarry beat Echeverry in the final. A few years ago, Giorgi served a slightly less than 1 year suspension for a banned substance. I remember at the time I accidentally called him Argentinian. He's not. He's from Chile. So he wins the title in his home country. He had his son on the court, a little baby boy who tried to eat the microphone. They all do, Babies love microphones.
We just watched this past week Full Swing, which was the golf version of the tennis Netflix docuseries.
That's what it was called?
Full Swing.
Oh, okay. Somebody said that we should rename our podcast The Birdie Shot.
The Birdie Shot.
Because we were getting into golf. Yeah. You know way more about golf than I do, but I grew up with it always on TV in my house, mostly on Sundays, right? And
you played golf as a child.
And my grandparents played and they watched a lot of golf, but I don't really know a ton about the modern game until I started watching players who I found attractive. Brooks Koepka.
And so you really only watch on Sundays if Brooks is in competition.
Right, and lately he's not. And he's gone to live, right? The competing tour, and so I won't see him week in, week out. This documentary was, to me, it was gripping. Like, I actually found myself compelled to follow these random players who I'd never heard of. They just managed to craft stories to me that were more interesting than Breakpoint.
I mean, what was the tennis equivalent of Joel Damon? Of
Yes.
Sahith Theegala? I don't know. I mean, the On story was great. Mm-hmm. In Breakpoint? Is that what it was called?
Yeah.
But overall, for one, the stories were easier to follow vis-a-vis the actual play, right?
You can look at a leaderboard, right? They do an infographic of somebody's changes moving up the leaderboard. It's very visual. It's easy to grasp.
And that was one of the sticking points for me with Breakpoint, is that we didn't really see much actual tennis.
No.
Like, the only thing that really sticks out to me is the fabricated on-court injury by Taylor Fritz at Indian Wells.
Not fabricated.
Fabricated in that it was over-exaggerated.
Sure. Yes.
That part was scripted.
It was. I also felt like the golfers were willing to go a little bit deeper, or maybe the documentary was willing to spend a little more time with them. I felt that they actually created a narrative in each episode that I felt was missing from the tennis version.
In Full Swing, you have the specter of Liv hanging over the entire series, right? Mm-hmm. And so that creates added context, added drama. It creates built-in drama to the season of golf that's there at every turn. What could that have been in tennis? Did we get a peep about the PTPA? We may have, but like, you could have created a season-long narrative for that show, tapping into why something like the PTPA exists, to show just how much tennis players are struggling on a week-to-week basis.
Right. It was very surface level. Compared to in golf, I felt like we knew these people's finances. We knew that Joel Damon had a traumatic experience, his mother passing away. We understood how golfers made money and why they would make the decision to go to live. Even if they were like silly, rationalizing reasons.
Lying through their teeth.
Everybody who was asked, had to do this little song and dance. Like, they had to pretend that it wasn't strictly mercenary.
Right.
And
like, I'm doing this for my family.
I have to take care of my family. Like,
that my great-great-great-grandchildren will never have to want for anything.
Right. You make millions upon millions per year just in prize money. And then now you're saying you have to take care of your family. Clearly, people who have money, if you have money, it will never be enough. So stop pretending like you really had to think that hard about it. Just say, yeah, I'm going to live because I'm making a shit ton of money. But that in and of itself was kind of interesting to watch. So golf was lucky that they had that big storyline. Golf is also lucky that the people they chose to follow in January ended up doing big things on tour.
I also think that Full Swing benefited from there being so much money in golf. You can tell a wider swath of stories when so few of the people who you're covering are actually struggling.
Yeah, yeah.
For context, the year-to-date prize money list comparison between the PGA Tour and the ATP Tour, as of right now, 65 men have earned over $1 million on the golf course alone this year. 65 PGA Tour players have earned over $1 million.
It's March 6th.
Something like 105 of them have earned over $500,000. How many ATP players have won $1 million to date? 4.
Yeah.
4 compared to 65.
And golf has not had a major yet. Tennis has. So I came very close. You asked me. I almost guessed the number for golf. I estimated there were 60 players who've reached $1 million. There's 65. But when you asked about tennis, I said, I think probably like 11 or 12 have made $1 million. No, only 4. One of them had to win the Australian Open. Another had to win 3 tournaments back to back in order to do that. Are you saying you're joining the PTPA staff? No. And what's funny is that like golfers still want more. Like they still want a bigger piece of the pie. So much so that they're going to this shady ass live where they have all these weird rules about what players can do. They're taking the risk, right? Because the payoff is unbelievable. Even if they make that money for just 1 year. But they are risking being banned from the PGA forever. I don't think they will be. Judging by sports history, and this has happened in tennis too, I don't think they'll be banned forever, but they are taking that risk.
Okay, but what is it that's different about golf as opposed to tennis that allowed for such better behind-the-scenes footage? Like everything felt so much more laid back, that the players had more time to tell stories in between events.
Yeah, I would be actually interested to know from people who do spend a lot of time behind the scenes in tennis, like what was missed. Like, was there an opportunity to make a documentary like the golf one or better, and was it just missed, or is it just a different feeling behind the scenes? Is it because most of these guys come from a certain class? They have a lot in common. Most of them are white. Most of them are country club types. Maybe the camaraderie comes more naturally to them.
Right, but we saw the dynamic with Mito Pereira and a lot of the South American golfers that they go and they rent a house together and all the families are there together.
Yes.
I'm sure that kind of dynamic exists in like, pockets and cliques on the tennis tours.
I would have loved to see that.
So
yeah.
Was it just a complete lack of imagination or wherewithal to know where to look for these stories? Because Nick Kyrgios and what is his name? Kokkinakis. That was not it. Like you go to the Australian Open and all that happened and that's what you come up with. It's not because Rafa Nadal didn't want to play ball with this documentary, because neither did Tiger Woods, but he was there at every turn.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like you made the decision that this was going to be who is next after the big three. This tired trope narrative that we've presided over for the last 8-9 years, and even beyond that. People have been looking beyond the Williamses for decades now, right? And so it was just such a failure of imagination.
Just tell us stories. And even with the Nick thing, I wouldn't really have been interested in any incarnation of a Kyrgios episode, but they spend some time building him up and talking about how he's tennis's bad boy. And then the rest of the episode is an attempt to soften his hard edges. And it was like, what story are you telling here? This doesn't feel authentic to anyone. We
didn't get families in Breakpoint. Yeah. Seeing Sahith and his father and his family, seeing Tony Finau and his entire family.
The whole brood.
Him winning on home turf in Minnesota at the 3M Open. Like, those are interesting things. That when he lands off the plane and the whole family's there on the tarmac. We didn't get that really in Breakpoint. We got Once's husband/trainer.
Yeah, or even Finau really upset that he missed his son's golf tournament. That was emotional stuff. Anyway, I am shocked how much I enjoyed this golf documentary. I would watch another season.
No, absolutely.
And now we're staring down the barrel of Breakpoint Part 2, and it just feels like, oh, I guess we got to do this again. It feels like more of a chore.
But now you have like a handful of other golfers outside of Brooks Koepka to follow.
Totally. I'm going to be rooting for Matt Fitzpatrick. Like, who? But seriously, I am. Because I found his episode really interesting.
Until we find out that they're all Trump supporters.
Well.
Which they probably are.
Probably. Yeah.
If you Google that type of stuff, even going back to like 2000, something like 90-something% of golfers surveyed are all Republican.
Yes.
It's probably like the most Republican North American sport that there is.
Probably. Angela Bassett did the thing. Viola Davis, my woman king.
Blanchett Kate?
You're a genius.
Jamie Lee is all of us.
Jamie Lee is
not all of us.
She's the daughter of Tony Curtis and Janet Leigh. Jamie Lee has really been leaning into the Nepo baby thing because she was clearly very bothered by that Vulture story about Nepo babies in Hollywood. She said it was hateful.
Oh dear.
It's so wild to me. Jamie, because there's such an easy answer to that. I think we already talked about that, so it doesn't have to be that deep.
Yeah,
but,
who was the one who answered it best that we saw?
Oh, I don't remember.
It was somebody unexpected. It was Alison Williams, right?
Oh, yes. Anyway, the Ariana DeBose BAFTA musical number has been living rent-free in the heads of homosexuals around the globe.
Drag queens were out here with the swiftness creating routines to this.
Whoever was one drag queen I saw on the thing happened on Sunday. By Wednesday, she already had a mix and a performance of this song going around on TikTok. I am just so hats off to you.
When this happened, I saw people talking about Ariana and some performance and how bad. I kept seeing people say it was horrendous and that they couldn't believe it. And then hours later, I watched it and I was like, this is awesome. This is so good. And I think you were initially caught up in, like, this woman is supremely talented and in no way, shape, or form should she be out here performing out of breath.
Right. I'm like, what? She's actually a dancer first. Why is she out of breath?
And I was like, was that maybe part of the plan? And even if it weren't, it still worked? Like...
the funny thing was the reactions, because it seemed like each actress was so caught off guard. Like, it happened so fast. Their names are being sung. And then as you get later in the sequence, like, then they realize, oh, okay, I'm going to be on camera. She's going to say all of our names. So they know how to react. I've never seen anything go from cringe to celebrated so quickly.
Well, I think it's because the people who found it cringe didn't get it. I don't think it was ever intended to be a serious thing. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think she was taking the piss the entire time.
And people were mocking her online, so much so that it seemed like she deleted her Twitter. But she came back. It's, she has good humor about it. Angela Bassett gave her stamp of approval. At the NAACP Image Awards, Angela Bassett even accepted awards, saying, I guess Angela Bassett did the thing.
Chaka Khan.
Chaka Khan?
Chaka Khan.
Chaka Khan.
Chaka Khan.
This is so funny to me. I know you put it on the agenda. I'm so tired of seeing the discourse about this because a lot of people don't know Chaka Khan. And they also don't know what her generation of singers gives. Mm-hmm. In both talent and pure hateration.
Right. There was this clip going around of Whitney back in the 80s talking with Sissy, her mother, and about Paula Abdul. And saying, but mama, she's singing off key on the record.
On the record.
On the record. But that's...
Oh, you remember Dame Shirley Bassey said Tina Turner, she doesn't have the range.
Right, but Paula didn't have the range. Like, she was not a
Correct.
singer, right? For Chaka out here to be coming for Miss Carey and calling her position at number 5 on this made-up list Paola.
Paola.
Like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Like, we know that Chaka is from the Aretha school of... Well, not even, because Aretha publicly would never be that. She's more from the shade school of things.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
She's much more subtle with it.
Chaka's different, right? Like, she grew up different. She was always more confrontational, more in your face. Aretha was imperious. But if you read any of her biographies, you know that she was
Deeply
or she could be
insecure.
incredibly jealous and very insecure. She wasn't particularly generous to other female singers, especially ones who came after her. Like, apparently she was jealous of Natalie Cole, Roberta Flack, which is so interesting because they all do very different things.
Mm-hmm. Well, part of it too is that Aretha was offered a lot of things that those women went on to have great success with, and she passed.
Yes.
Like I think This Will Be is one of them that Aretha passed on, and she
could sing. You can hear her singing.
Exactly. This is just deeply mean-spirited. And for me, while I've adored Chaka Khan and her performances over the years, this type of mean-spiritedness is just not on for me. Well, I get it and I understand where it comes from.
No, because it was incorrect.
Exactly.
That's what you have the problem with. I would totally get if she's annoyed that Adele and Mary are ranked higher than her, because I think objectively Chaka is a better singer. But Mariah is Mariah. Like, her saying that Mariah placing so high is Paola, that's personal. There's nothing objective in that reading of it. That's just personal. Like, she don't like her.
These are two women in the history of music who have two of the most distinctive tones. They open their mouth, you know who's singing. And, not for nothing, Miss Chaka Khan, like, you've had your various moments of vocal missteps over the years. There were times when you sang and I would have taken Whoopi Goldberg's nails on the chalkboard in Sister Act instead.
Wow.
There were times.
Wow. You are bothered.
I mean, I'm so annoyed by it. Partly because I enjoy her music so much and I think so highly of her talent.
No, you know what bothered me is that she was like, oh, Christina Aguilera, yeah, she can stay. Black people like her. Like, what? Black people like Mariah Carey too, don't they? I was so confused by that statement, which convinced me that it's a personal thing with Mariah.
Because
she's also talked shit about Beyonce before in the past. But now she's like, oh, no, Beyonce's a great singer. Like, I don't think there's a lot of internal logic to this.
Finally, just an anecdote here. Not this past Saturday, the one before. I waited on somebody who is Canada famous.
Yeah.
It is the second time in my life that I've waited on a famous person. The first time was Colin Croft. If you are a follower of cricket, Colin Croft is one of the great West Indian fast bowlers. And he walked into my restaurant at like 3 p.m. in the middle of the week one day. And for whatever reason, there was no host. So I see this man walking toward the main dining room. And I immediately recognize him. And I say, hello, Mr. Croft. And he pointed at me and he said, you come here. And I'm like, oh shit, what did I do? And then so I go to the front and his daughter is there. And he says to her, see, I told you, everywhere I go, somebody recognizes me.
So there are definitely 2 or 3 people listening who are very excited about that.
Right. And so we had a great time chit-chatting. It felt very natural, whatever. This time, I'm not going to say who it was. I think that's fair, right?
Oh, okay, fine.
But people can guess. If they want to reach out and ask if they're correct, they can do that. I would say this person was on the second most famous Canadian sitcom of the last 5 years.
Sure.
So not that one, but that one.
Mm-hmm.
And
remember, Canadian famous, not Marvel famous.
Exactly. Well, no, I'm getting to the next clue. I'm saying, and if you get that show right, not that one, but that one. And he was there with his wife and 2 kids. That's another clue. And they were just lovely. All of them. They were just so great.
There was another famous person. You did not serve them, but perhaps the most famous of all. Ooh. Queen of the dance hall.
Yes, Spice.
She's strong. She healthy. She look good.
Yeah, she was there with a bunch of her friends. I didn't wait on her that day. She was wearing her signature blue hair. Mm-hmm. And all three of these people, I can say, were all good tippers, which is very important.
Nice. That is important.
Lastly, this is the final call, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, the final call for addresses. We sent out our first batch recently. It's in the post right now. We honestly, we have been delayed because our dog died. I don't know how else to say it. I mean, it really has been a fucking mess over here.
Yeah.
As you can imagine, the weeks leading up were exceedingly difficult, and we're just kind of putting things back together now. So we're continuing to do postcards. We just would have preferred to have them done before.
Mm-hmm. So mid-March is now our final deadline for us. Yeah. Song dedication for this episode, and I'm gonna make an executive decision and make it the title of the episode.
Okay.
"Fly Like a Bird" by Miss Mariah Carey.
One of my all-time faves.
So I think it's, as you know, it's one of my top 4. Mm. And I'd like to commemorate the moment with something special. My name is Jonathan. You can find me on Twitter at tennis_John.
And I'm James at ElliotJMR.
2 L's, 2 T's. You can find everything BodyServe related at linktree.com/thebodyserve. Your favorite tournament of the year is upon us.
Yes, somebody will be doing questions soon over the next few episodes, and somebody said, we know the tournaments you don't like. How about listing the tournaments you do like? So I'm going to back off on the negativity there. There are lots of tournaments I do like, which I will list when the question comes up. Yes.
Okay.
So I'm not going to dwell on the dislike.
Okay. Thanks for listening.
Till next time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.